You look at the right track, wrong track poll, and all of them are going wildly in the wrong direction. Only a third of Americans think America is going on the right track, and 2/3 think it's going on the wrong track. There's another poll out yesterday that we cited that said only 33% of Americans agree with Donald Trump's handling of the U.S. government. You look at all of the economic numbers, this is where Trump's handling of the issues on the economy, the Associated Press, only that's lower, I think, than Joe Biden's numbers at his lowest point. I mean, we're moving toward George W. Bush numbers at the end of his term here. The economy, only 33% approve. Health care, again, for Democrats that are too stupid to realize you won the government shutdown, don't be stupid. You won the government shutdown. Only 34% of Americans agree with Donald Trump's handling of health care. Immigration, it's the issue that he's been right side up on. Now, he's 15 points in the negative on his strongest issue, in part because these ongoing masked ICE raids of American cities. And then there you go, the handling of the federal government, 33%. And then you add on top of that, I mean, I've been on the House floor. I know what it's like when everybody gets on the House floor and starts talking, when your party gets walloped. And it very quickly, people are like, okay, yeah, we got to take care of ourselves because the guy on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue is not going to do it. Well, that's exactly what the Republicans are starting to think right now on Capitol Hill. So how does he hold this coalition together and tell them to vote to protect records of a pedophile?
Yeah, the reemergence of the Epstein story comes at the worst possible time for President Trump.
Bad timing.
This is the weakest moment of his second term by far. Republicans lose badly at the ballot box last week on Election Day. You just went through a lot of polls where Americans clearly unhappy with Trump's performance as president. We had the Supreme Court express real skepticism of his signature economic policy, these tariffs. That may be unwound in days ahead. We have, of course, the hubbub about the ballroom and everything else where Trump, is slipping here. And we also are seeing he's running into, and this is rare, the limits of his power with his own party. Those calls to the House of Representatives, those congresswomen who defied him and said, no, we're not going to do that. As I reported for a piece I wrote last night for The Atlantic, he's talking to allies. They may have a similar pressure campaign with some senators once the bill goes there. And if it does pass both chambers, and we don't know that it will, but if it does pass both chambers, then he's going to be in a position where he'll have to veto it. And that will, of course, raise all sorts of questions. What is he hiding? And even some of his allies that he's been on as I reported, he's been on the phone with over the last 48 hours are saying to him, like, you're not handling this the right way. You're just causing more attention to it. You're acting like you do have something to hide. And that is, Vaughn Hilliard, where we are right now. It's a White House trying to exhibit some damage control, furiously sort of spin their way out of this. But it is. Privately, they acknowledge this is a tough moment. So take us inside the room there. What more should we expect from the White House and from the president himself? And we open this hour with a telling video clip. Since the Epstein emails were released, President Donald Trump, not camera shy. He loves taking questions from the press pool anyway, usually stacked with friendly faces, since now the White House has gained control largely over that. Hasn't taken a single question. Reporters did not get to go in to see his dinner with business leaders the other night. When he signed the bill to get the government open again, no questions. And as we showed yesterday, he and the First Lady hurriedly left that event in the East Room. Again, he doesn't want to be asked about Epstein.
Right, and even if you go back to a year ago, he wouldn't want to take questions about Stormy Daniels. He'd want to take questions about anything else besides the allegations of sexual impropriety, of cheating on his spouse, of being affiliated with Jeffrey Epstein here. And I think this is what has left Caroline Leavitt and those White House allies in such a difficult place. Now, number one, of course, they've chosen to come and defend and represent this individual. But at the same time, right, you can't just label this as a hoax when, document by document, document, according to this private communication, Jeffrey Epstein makes the case that Donald Trump was, in fact, aware of the girls. And it's more than just kicking him out of your club. But to what extent, over the course of 3 decades, do you associate with this individual and prop up, effectively, the power dynamics in which young women are taken advantage of? And I think this comes down to, when you're talking about American voters, in 2016, so many people voted for him on the idea that it was locker room talk. But in the decades since, it's more than locker room talk. There is now a file of evidence in which the president has serious accusations of sexual assault and harassment that have been levied against him. He was found to have paid off Stormy Daniels in order to advance his presidential campaign. He was found to have defamed and sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll. And if you go back to how voters view people that face these allegations, Herschel Walker lost. Roy Moore lost. Charles Herbster lost. Sean Parnell was pushed out of his race over in Pennsylvania here. You know, I think that this is where there is a reckoning among the American electorate in which Donald Trump has not shown any regret. And if you look at this at a very human level, he has left people like his secretary in a very difficult position because he has not been able over the last decade to take that inner look and tell the American public that he regrets associating with Jeffrey Epstein. Instead, he sent his deputy attorney general down to have a conversation with Ghislaine Maxwell and won't rule out a potential pardon for her here. I think that this is a moment, whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, or Nancy Mace, I think that this is what is going to lead to Leader Thune really being the focus point of attention, and whether he even brings this discharge petition up for a vote, and whether there are going to be 13 Republican senators that agree to release these files. It is damning, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for the Republican Party to defend what its own voters are unwilling to themselves.
Well, and from the public perspective, from the electorate's perspective, I mean, the thing about this story, too, is that it's not like having to understand what a clean CR means or even what tariffs mean. This is such a very simple story that, of course, Joe, as you pointed out, that the Republican Party, the MAGA base, really did bang the drum on for years and years. And so, Chris Matthews, the question I have here is, when there is an issue like this with such resonance, especially among, by the way, the young men who we're seeing now turn the other direction in terms of these election results in the last couple of weeks, what are the senators thinking here as a vote approaches the Senate and they have to make a choice about, like, what do we do now with an issue that actually has a broad resonance and a simplicity of understanding with the American people?
Well, I don't think the senators have any guts, and I think this is a problem. I mean, if you think about, you know, where I take my kids for pizza right down the road on Connecticut Avenue. A guy comes in there with a shotgun because he hears there's a child molesting or whatever going on there, young girls. They believe this. And this has always been the crowd that Trump wants to cultivate. Look at all the people he's given pardons to and commuted sentences of. Everybody who's on the wacko right, the far right, the crazy right, he's tried to look out for. But not in this case. Not in this case. He doesn't want anybody to find out about this. This is like Nixon and the tapes. And this is a guy condescending to his own people. I created MAGA. What? You created? Oh, I created Frankenstein. So he's going to obey me. I created Frankenstein. So he's going to obey me now. No, he's not. Because Frankenstein is self-created in many ways. The people out there on the far right are on the far right before Trump ever got there. And they have a real suspicion of power. And they think rich people, people with cultivated tastes, get away with stuff in a million years they would go to jail for. And it's not just immoral, it's illegal. It's, as Amika said, you're talking about mistreating, you know, sub-teenage, early teenage. When you see the picture of the prince with that young woman, imagine the world that she was being introduced to. Who was talking to her and telling her what to do and how to behave and what to put up with? You know, that's a horrible world out there. It's a horrible world. And Trump knows that world. He knows, quote, he knows about the girls. What a sentence. What does that mean?
Yeah, and David Drucker, again, the MAGA base. Imagine if the MAGA base had seen Joe Biden called somebody in to vote to suppress the Epstein files, took a Democrat into the Situation Room and sat them with Attorney General Merrick Garland and FBI Director Wray and they lobbied this Democratic Congresswoman to not release the files. I mean, that is, it would still be leading every podcast in America today. But how extraordinary that that's exactly what the Trump administration did. They called a Republican congresswoman into the Situation Room at the White House, into the Situation Room. And and then had the Attorney General and the FBI Director lobby a congresswoman on a legislative matter regarding a discharge petition. For the MAGA base, this is the worst case scenario of billionaires trying to protect other billionaires.
Yeah, quite a situation. Look, I've never given much thought to this conspiracy, because if the government was competent enough to pull something like this off and hide things, imagine the little things it could get right. But the way the president is acting here is why everybody is asking, what his involvement is. All he had to say was, hey, I said we were going to expose this. We're in charge. This is amazing. Sign me up. I'm the first vote. I mean, he can't vote, but you see what I'm saying here. And he's created the division within his party. The other thing here that is a huge problem for Republicans is that this issue is really not political, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing when I talk to, friends and family and people who don't follow politics as closely as we have to, they're like, what about that Epstein thing, right? This is just one of those topics that grabs everybody's interest. And so there's just no escaping it. There's no pinning it on the Democrats, who, it should be said, have had the good political sense to take a hold of this and force Republicans to deal with it, which is not something that they did over the past several years. And so now we're going to see exactly how this plays out. It's going to be a real live wire in the Senate, where I think you're going to see some senators really hesitant to cross the president on this, but others, realizing that this thing is far beyond their control and they don't want to end up on the wrong side of it, especially staring down the next two elections.
Well, and as David said, a lot of people have said there's no grand conspiracy here, but Donald Trump's making it look like a conspiracy. And as we've said time and again, NBC News has reported, and Ken Delaney has reported, and Tom Winters reported that Donald Trump's not on the list, right? And so we keep hearing that, which really has Washington asking the question, well, if he's not on the list, then who's he protecting, and why in the world is he going through all of this if, in fact, NBC reporting shows that he's not on Epstein's list?
And who wouldn't want to get all the answers necessary about what rich and powerful men were involved in a wide-ranging pedophilia operation?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty simple 1 + 1 = 2. And also, what also added to the drama, not just, the White House focusing in on Lauren Boebert and other actions to try and prevent this information from coming out, seemingly, but all this time, 7 weeks, 50 days, to push off the swearing in of a congresswoman who is the last vote to get that petition through.
To get it out,
that built up the drama and the intrigue as to what the heck is in there.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you talk to any crisis management expert, they'll tell you, get it out there, get it behind you, move on. And we see time and time again, politicians making the mistake. I thought Hillary Clinton in the 2016 campaign, I remember she gave a speech at the United Nations, went out, held a press conference, and if she had gotten all of that server stuff behind her right there, it would have been a completely different campaign. Instead, it followed her throughout the entire campaign. At the end of the campaign, and you look back, well, it's not as bad as what, so Donald Trump's doing, or not as bad as what other. But she didn't get in front of it. And here we have Donald Trump doing the same thing. Again, NBC News reporting he's not on the list. So why is he doing this in a way that's making him take on all this political water? It just doesn't make sense.
Putting all the Republicans in this position.
Right.
So